Everyone. Today we'll be continue talking about Store's wonderful book on Kant on choosing freedom and the good life. The basic idea again is that for Kant, the life that is worth living, is the life of freedom, the life of self-mastery. To be free is to choose the principles upon which you act. To act freely is to act on the principles that you choose for yourself. So that seems pretty attractive. A crucial move that Kant makes is to say that one is free only when one is rational, only when one acts on reasons. That itself is a bit controversial, that itself is substantive, but Kant's main idea is that if you act because you feel like it, if you act because you have this strong emotion, then the explanation for your action is not what you choose the principles that you choose to give to yourself is biology, is the biological predispositions and the way in which the environment has shaped those emotional reactions. So if you act purely on the basis of emotion, there's a sense in which you're not truly free. You're more acting in this kind of an animalistic sense. So for Kant, the freedom that matters is the positive freedom, the one in which you actually think, you deliberate, you assess the options, and then you choose one course of action on the basis of some considerations you have. So positive freedom is the one in which you're actually acting on the basis of the principles that you give to yourself. So that's the good life, is the life of freedom, which is the rational life. The other major controversial move is the one that we're going to make now. And for Kant, the life of freedom is not only the rational life, but it's also the moral life. Morality, in some sense, reduces to rationality. You only act rationally when you have deliberated morally and act within the bounds of the moral law. That's the major move, and we're going to spell that out carefully this time. So in previous chapters on discussion of freedom, Kant said something like, the great ideal kind of version of freedom is the one in which you act on the principles that you give to yourself, but those very principles pass your own test of rational scrutiny. The voice of morality comes not from society, but comes from within the individual. That means that if you're merely repeating what you've been told, you're merely repeating your culture, your parents' ideas, and so on, you're again not the ultimate explanation for your actions, but rather your culture is, your society is, your parents are, your cultural indoctrination is. For you to be truly free, it has to be an expression of your own thinking. It has to be you who's settling what you think is right and then acting on that basis. So that's the topic for today. I'm gonna begin kind of backwards. I'm gonna begin with the discussion of equality, which is towards the end of the chapter. And I think Story does a great job of bringing together why equality at the end of the day grounds a Kantian way of thinking about morality. So let's begin with an example. Suppose you heard about this philosophy class, you thought, oh, philosophy sounds so cool. It's going to be like reading poetry. It's going to be like the kinds of things people tell when they're camping and around the fire. They say very cool things, and then you're very excitedly to sign up for my class. But then you start reading about the categorical imperative, about very abstract ideas, and you feel very kind of resentful. You feel frustrated. You're angry that you didn't get what you thought you were getting. And suppose I'm, walking in the university, I'm just walking around, and then you run into me, like, oh, there's the professor. How you, and you feel betrayed because of the content of the material. So you just walked up to me and just punch me in the face. So that's the action, that's the event. You punch me in the face out of your frustration, out of your anger, with this mismatch between your expectations with the course and what actually happened in the course. Here's what I want to say. That was immoral. That was wrong. You wronged me. Here's what Kant wants to say. If we use the reason and think about that case as described without changing it, that case as described, we as rational agents will come to the same judgment. That was not cool. That was wrong. The students shouldn't have punched the professor for those reasons. So that's a wrong, an example of a wrongful action. Now, if you're just repeating your culture, and in your culture, students punch professors when they're frustrated, you might think, hey, for us, it's okay here. Kant is not denying that some cultural practices might clash with moral judgments. What Kant is saying is that if you don't just appeal to your cultural practices, but you actually think about the case, reasonable, rational agents will come to the same judgment, at least on fundamental cases. And simple cases, when it gets complicated, then people can disagree. But in simple cases like this one, reason agrees. People's reason agree that, yeah, punching the professor because you're frustrated is not okay. It's immoral. You're wronging the professor. So that's the first move. We agree on the judgment. We rational agents agree on the judgment, Kant says. Second move, we must ask, well, why? Why is it wrong to punch the professor when you're angry about the content of the class? So here's some wrong answers to that question. One, well, because the professor's male. The gender of the professor makes it wrong for you to punch the professor. If the professor were, say, female, then you can punch the professor. And the answer is, well, no, right? Like there might be societies that are sexist that ascribe more kind of value to one gender or the other, and that treat people that disrespect one gender as worse than the other. But again, we're not appealing to cultures. We're thinking about why is it that it is wrong to punch the professor in the face because you're frustrated with the content. Kant thinks gender's obviously not it. So whatever it is that makes it wrong for you to punch me in the face is not gender. That's a bad answer. How about race? Same story. How about things that we care about, like talent? Is the professor very smart? Is that why it's wrong? Well, Kant thinks, well, good that the professor's smart if that's the case, but that's not it. The professor can be a lot less smart, can be even more smart, and it would still be wrong. The wronging the professor is not grounded in things like gender, like race, like height, like things like talents, like intelligence. Does the professor run very fast? Is that it? Is he very good at basketball or something? Well, that may or may not be true, but it's orthogonal to the judgment why it is wrong to punish the professor. What's the answer? Why is it that it's wrong? Here's one much more credible. So all of those are bad answers, right? Obviously, none of those talents or identities ground what makes it wrong to punish a professor. Here's the significantly better answer. Well, because you cause pain to the professor. The professor is the kind of being that experiences pain. So inflicting pain on a being that can experience pain is wrong. That's actually a really good, serious contender for why it is wrong to punch me. Kant would say, though, that that's not quite it. That doesn't get to the root of the matter. And one way of seeing Kant's point is by noticing that even if I were to have this kind of illness or disease, according to which or on the basis of which I wouldn't experience pain, it would still be wrong for you to punch me in that kind of particular case. So even if I didn't experience pain, you still shouldn't punch me. It would still be wrong for you to punch me. So then all of those are the wrong answers. What is the right answer? Kant thinks because I have dignity, because I have this value. So the categorical imperative, the moral law, is grounded in human equality, and human equality is grounded in dignity. So dignity is this, for Kant, unconditional and unalienable value. To have dignity is to have a particular kind of value. So for dignity to be unconditional is for dignity, not to depend upon other things like talents, accomplishments, race, gender. That's why the example of what is it that makes it wrong for you to punch me? I went through these things that we care about, like our identities or our talents or skill and their skills, and pointed out none of those is what grounds you're it being wrong for the student to punch me. Kant's answer is, well, that's because dignity is not grounded in any of those things. Does not depend upon, is not conditional upon those things. Moral agents have dignity, have value, independently of how fast they run, independently of how great they paint, independently of how intelligent they are, independently of their race, independently of their gender, and so on. Identities and talents and skills are not the things that ground dignity. Dignity is unconditional upon those things, is the thought. It is merely having status as a moral agent. It's merely being a rational being capable of making free choices and thereby being responsible for one's actions that suffice for one to have dignity. That is the ground of dignity. And also, dignity is unalienable. So it cannot be taken away. People might treat other people as though those others don't have dignity, say, by enslaving them. But the fact that some people treat others as though they have the dignity doesn't mean that those others don't have dignity. Dignity is not something that is bestowed upon by other people. Dignity is a value that people have just in virtue of being moral agents. And failure to respect and recognize the dignity doesn't do away with the dignity. That's in fact what's wrong with, say, slavery and other sorts of treatment, that they fail to recognize that the being in question deserves equal respect. So anyway, so dignity grounds it being wrong to mistreat people in different ways. So violating or disrespecting dignity is what makes it wrong. So here are the three levels of judgments that Kant thinks, if you think about it, you would all agree. One, it is wrong to punch the professor because you're upset by the content of the material. Two, what makes it wrong for you to punch the professor is that the professor has dignity. the dignity is a kind of value that is unconditional and alienable. It's grounded in the professor's mere status as a moral agent, that the professor has freedom, can understand what's right from wrong, can choose on that basis, can be responsible for their actions. That's sufficient for it to be wrong to disrespect and violate the dignity of the professor. That's the second move. Third move, we all have the same dignity. That is the equality. Equality means that even though some of us are faster than others, even though some of us are, have a gender versus than others, have different genders and so on, none of that carves at the ground for what makes it wrong to treat people make people wrongly. Dignity does, and that's the same across people. So Kant thinks we all, if we think about it, come to that conclusion, and that's going to be the whole ground of morality. So let's see how it's spelled out. So one of the ways in which Kant spells this out is by what he calls the universal law. The universal law is like what he calls a formulation of the categorical imperative. He has this, weird vocabulary, but the thought is here's a test of rationality to tell whether or not a particular action is right or wrong. Here's how you can tell whether or not you're respecting or violating the equality or dignity of others. And here's his wording. Act only in accordance with that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. The shorthand for that is something like moral actions are universalizable. This is dense, this is hard, so let's kind of spell it out. Let's begin with the maxim category. A maxim is a principle of action. That's one way of thinking about it. A maxim is a policy one adheres to in acting, is the consideration one chooses as one's reasons for action. All of those are different ways of saying slightly similar things. Here's the way I like to put it. A maxim is a description of an action with the intention of the agent built into the description. So, for example, here are two different maxims. I give a burger to a homeless to satiate the homeless hunger, versus I give a burger to a homeless to impress a crush. So here's a major Kantian observation about morality. When you see an action, when you do an action, to ask the question is for example, handing a burger to homeless, asking the question, is this action right or wrong? Is handing the burger to homeless right or wrong? Kant thinks we don't know enough. We can only assess the moral status of an action by thinking about, by including the goal, the intention, the purpose of the agent. We should be assessing not actions as such. We should be assessing maxims, actions with purposes built together. And here are two. To give a burger to a homeless to associate homeless hunger, or to give a burger to a homeless to impress a crush. Those are different maxims. So now let's go back to the articulation of the universal law. Act only in accordance with the maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. So it actually gives you a test. It says, okay, when you're acting in the world, think about not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. Build a maxim, right? This is the thing that I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it. Now, if you want to know whether that is a moral action or that the maxim is one that it's rationally justifiable, you run it through this test, this universalization test. You ask yourself, what if everyone did that? What if everyone did this action with this intention? What if this maxim were to become a universal law that everyone acted that way? And if you can do that consistently, that is, you can universalize, you can imagine a society in which everyone did this thing, this maxim, uh, and everything's fine, then it's a rational action. But if something breaks apart, if you cannot consistently will to make it a universal law, the maxim, then it becomes immoral. And let's go with these examples. So suppose that I'm walking in the street, I have this burger, I'm going to have lunch, and then I see a homeless person and I feel compassion, I feel bad. I think, oh, I have so much stuff. The homeless is hungry. He doesn't have any money to buy food. That's so bad. Let me give him my burger, right? I give the burger to the homeless to satiate his hunger. What if everyone did that? What if everyone acted on the basis of this maxim? Well, then there will be no homeless people, or at least no hungry homeless people. So that would be good, right? It would be a better society in which people, when they see a homeless person, will give them a burger. There would be a lot less hunger. So that's good, right? So I can consistently will that others, in fact, everyone else, acted on the basis of the maxim on the basis of which I'm acting. If everyone else gave burgers to homeless to satiate their hunger, things will be great, right? I can consistently will. How about the other one? Suppose again, I'm walking down the street, I have this burger, and I see this homeless. But I also notice that across from the homeless, there is this cafe. The sitting in this cafe is this crush. There's this girl I've been wanting to date for a long time, but she doesn't like me as much. She thinks I'm not enough of a good person. She likes good people, and she's not so sure that I'm a that great of a person. And then it crosses my mind, oh, I can tell she's watching, but she doesn't know that I can tell she's watching. So, oh, if I hand this burger to the homeless, she will see me handing over the homeless to this burger to the homeless, and she would think I'm a great person. Ooh, okay, well then let me do that. Let me hand the burger so that she's impressed. So next time I ask her out, she'll say, "Yeah, of course, let's go, have coffee or something." So my maxim is give the burger so that I can impress this crush, so I can, go on a date or ask on a date and be accepted. So that's the maxim. Can it be universalized? And here's one of the cool observations by Kant. Actually, it cannot. Why? Because if everyone did that, if everyone handed burgers to homeless to impress a crush, then the crush would know that that's the reason why you're doing it, not the good reason to satiate the hunger of the homeless. You're doing it for this deceptive thing to make yourself appear as though you're better than you actually are. So then crushes would know that, oh yeah, he's just pretending. That's why people give burgers to homeless to impress others, making them think that they're better. But of course, I know that, so I'm not going to think that he's better. So I'm not going to accept his, invitation at a date. So in other words, the very activity I'm trying to do, convince a crush to go out with me, kind of clashes, it collapses. In a society in which everyone does what I do, my deceptive scheme falls apart. I cannot consistently will that everyone else does this. What I can, the thing that Kant thinks I have to be doing is to will that other people give burgers to homeless to associate their hunger, that is the right intentions, and for me to take advantage of that fact that good people do that for me to pass myself as a good person so that my crush accepts me. So I make myself an exception to the rule. Other people should act on the maxim, give burgers to homeless to associate hunger. I give burgers to homeless so that I can impress people and make them think I have the right intentions. Um, what I'm doing, the action is immoral because I'm treating myself as a kind of exception. I'm treating other people should follow this rule, but I'm doing something else. It doesn't apply to me. Kant thinks there's a kind of irrationality or inconsistency there. I cannot consistently will for people to act on the basis of my maxim. I require them to act on the basis of a different maxim, and then I take advantage of the opportunities that arise out of that. That's why it's immoral. Yeah. The general thought is that an action is morally right if the maxim can be consistently willed to be universalized. That's the basic idea. Another example that Kant really likes is making promises. So if you are a little short on cash, and then you ask a friend, "Oh, hey, can I borrow $100? I'll pay you next week. When I get a big paycheck." Um, if that's what you do, you make a promise, give me some money, I'll repay it in a month, I'll repay it in a week. Um, that promise making practice requires that people do fulfill their promises, that when the time comes, they give the money back, say. But if you have this deceptive scheme in which you want to borrow money, but then your intention is to break the promise, to not fulfill it, then again, the maxim ask for money, make a promise to repay with the intention not to repay is not going to be universalizable. You cannot consistently will for a society that everyone act on the basis of your maxim. Why? Because if everyone knew that people make promises for the sake of not fulfilling them with the intention of breaking them, then they're not going to trust you. Your friend is not going to give you the money. He's going to know that people promise to repay money with the intention of not repaying it, so you cannot fulfill it. What it is to do a wrongful action is to make yourself an exception to the rule. You must will that other people make promises with the intention of keeping them so that I can make a promise with the intention of not keeping it, get the stuff that I want, and then not fulfill my end of the bargain. Immorality, wrongfulness requires that kind of parasitic attachment to other people following the right rule for me to make an exception to myself so that I can do the wrong thing. And here's where the equality shows up, right? There's a sense in which the universal law requires that we treat everyone as equal. Everyone's dignity counts the same. And there's a sense in which when I do the wrong thing, I undervalue the equality of others. I undervalue the dignity of others. I treat others as though they are the ones that should fulfill these rules. I make an exception to myself. Because I have to say, I act as though I have a greater value, greater dignity. I count more. I am better. I don't have to follow those rules. You follow them, right? So immorality, as this kind of breaking of universal laws, requires making yourself an exception, which requires treating yourself as though you have more dignity. But as we've seen, we don't think that, right? If we think about it, we realize we don't have more dignity than others. We have the same amount of dignity and value. So there's this kind of irrationality built into the very acting immorally. And this kind of test reveals that. So what it is for you to act with full freedom is for you to choose the principles upon which you act, or the maxims that explain your actions, that include your intentions for the way you act, and that does pass your own test of rational scrutiny. This is the test of rational scrutiny. Why? Because you yourself think that you have the same dignity as others, and you yourself think that it is wrong for you to make yourself an exception to the rule that applies to everyone else. You yourself think there's something deceptive here. You can only get yourself to do the wrong thing, claims Kant, by either not thinking about it or lying to yourself, deceiving yourself about your own kind of judgments of reason. And here's the delivery of that. There's another formulation that I want to briefly discuss, just to show that for Kant, the categorical imperative, the moral law, kind of can be said in different ways. He thinks it's the same. We don't have to take it as the same. You can think, oh, it's a different formulation, it's a different kind of law, but it's also another test to figure out whether or not the way you're acting passes your own test of rational scrutiny. This one says, act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person in any other, never simply as means, but always as an end. Don't use people is the shorthand. To treat someone as a mere means, I'm sorry, to not treat people as mere means is to respect someone's freedom. To treat them as mere means is to disrespect their freedom. So here, freedom comes front and center. That's why this formulation is one of the most well-known Kantian formulations. What it means to respect someone is to not use them, to not treat them as means for your own goals. To respect them means to create space for them to make their own choices. To treat someone as an end is to promote their freedom, to promote their ends, to promote their goals. The basic condition of justice is don't use people. A further goal of being a good person is to promote the goals and the freedom of others. Um, Coercion and deception are two very basic ways of using someone. If you lie to someone about what you're doing, then they don't see your maxim. And that's a way of deceiving them and undermining their freedom. Again, giving a burger to a homeless to impress a crush is a way of deceiving the crush. It's a way of using the crush. Why the crush? Why is it using them? Because it's deceiving them into what they're entering, the kind of activity that they're entering. If the freedom is undermined of the other person because they're being deceived about what it is that they're doing. They think they're accepting a date with someone who's a good person because they saw them give a burger to a homeless, when in fact what they're entering, the kind of social arrangement they're entering, is this date with someone who deceived them about their moral character so that they get to accept it, right? There's this level of manipulation, and this level of manipulation is a way of undermining the freedom of the other person. They wouldn't have accepted the offer for a date if they knew the actual kind of motivations of the person. So deception counts as using, because it counts as undermining the freedom of the other person. So to treat other people morally is to treat them as equally valuable than yourself, to respect their freedom, to not lie or coerce or use them, to give them space for autonomous self-determination. That's the basic condition of freedom. Anyway, I'll end here. I'll see you next time. Bye.